Oh, there she goes. There she goes. Good gravy, Lucy. She can't be in the shot the whole time. Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm Nicole and today I'm going to be doing a June wrap-up. I was going to upload this video last week, but my kitten was kind of crazy the entire time that I was filming. And as adorable as she is, there was no way to focus on what I was talking about, so we're gonna try this again. You may hear her in the background, being curious, playing, prancing around. Don't mind her. She may at some point hop up on this table and say hello, though I have trained her that that's a no-no, so maybe she'll be obedient, but she's kind of needy. She likes attention, don't we all? Let's go over the 9 books that I read this month. When I started filming this the last time, I realized that a lot of the books that I read in June I mentioned in my mid-year freakout tag, so I'm not going to go over those in great detail. If you want to know more, you can go watch that video. So I'm just kind of going to do a quick little blurb about what I thought about the book, what it was about, and what I rated it. So 2 of the books that, oh God, don't do it, Lucy. She decided to join us, so here we are. It's okay. So 2 of the books that I read in June, I've actually lent out to some friends, and so I don't currently have them with me, so I'll go over those first. The first one being one of the best books that I've read this year, and that is And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer by Friedrich Bachmann. I gave it a 5 out of 5. It's about a grandfather who has Alzheimer's and he's trying to figure out a way to say goodbye to his grandson. If you've never read any of his books, highly recommend. It's a 5 out of 5. You should start with this one because it is so short. I will tell you that I cried hard like 3 times in only 75 pages. The man knows how to pack a punch. The second book that I read that I don't have with me is The 2 Lives of Lydia Bird. And if you watched my first video, you know that I didn't have many good things to say about this book. It was the worst book that I've read this year. I gave it a 1 star. So The 2 Lives of Lydia Bird was written by Josie Silver, and it's about how she copes with life afterwards. It's more of like a day-by-day account of Lydia's life, and I didn't find it particularly interesting or moving, which is really surprising considering that when someone dies tragically and grief is involved, you should feel something for the character, but I didn't. I did lend it to a friend, and I'm hoping that she likes it better than I did. I hope someone likes it. And if you do like it, please tell me what you thought about it and how I can spin it into a positive light, because I don't like strongly disliking a book. But anyways, moving on. The next 2 books that I read, which I didn't read them back to back, were The Prisoner of Azkaban and The Goblet of Fire. I mentioned that The Prisoner of Azkaban is my favorite Harry Potter book so far, and after reading The Goblet of Fire, it still doesn't beat the 3rd book, so I'm happy about that. 5 out of 5 for The Prisoner of Azkaban, 4 out of 5 for The Goblet of Fire, only because it just wasn't as good. It just wasn't as good as The Prisoner of Azkaban. I would give you a brief synopsis of both of these books, but it's Harry Potter, and I feel like the majority of the population has read it, and if you've read it, you know what it's about. If you haven't read it, I'm not going to spoil it for you. Start with book 1. You're going to love it. So good. This month I read 2 graphic novels. The first one that I read was When Stars Are Scattered by Omar Mohammed, and it's about Omar's life. He grew up in a Kenyan refugee camp with his little brother who has some kind of disability. He doesn't talk at all. I take that back. He only says 1 word throughout the entire book, and you don't ever really know why or what that word means. But this book was so good because I'd never heard about life in a refugee camp. Okay, you can stay right there. Guys, I told you she was needy, and I'm not kidding. Look at her. She's right here in front of the camera. Even when I'm reading, she gets in between me and a book. I wouldn't change a thing about her. So there's that. I'm really hoping that this recording is salvageable, since she's really loud when she purrs. But it's just so cute. May have to take a brief recess to figure out the cat situation. All right, where was I? This book was really unique because I've never read a story that took place in Africa, I don't believe. And it was just interesting to see what it's like growing up in a refugee camp. Omar is placed with a foster mom because he and his brother got separated from his parents whenever these rebels attacked their town. And so they live in their own little hut, but their foster mom lives in a hut very close by. And so she watches over them and helps them and things like that. But Omar really feels responsible for taking care of his brother. Because of that responsibility, he struggles when one of the local school teachers approaches him and presents him with the opportunity to go to school, tells him that he'll give him a notebook and a pencil, which is not something that all of the students have there. So the teacher reaches out to Omar and invites him to come to school, but Omar doesn't know whether or not he should, just because he doesn't want to leave his brother alone. But he also does want to set himself up for the future a little bit better. And so you get to see him go through that process of trying to make a better life for him and his brother. And it was just really touching. I think it's a middle grades graphic novel, but I still think it's a good read for anyone. It was really great to know that this was a true story and to see how it ended for Omar and his brother. There's pictures in the back, and he's even started a nonprofit that sends school supplies to Kenyan refugee camps, which I thought was super cool. And also, in the book, Omar is friends with a girl from town, and she is so bright and has such a great future ahead of her, but she is so limited simply because she is a girl. Through his nonprofit, he raises money to provide girls with bathrooms and feminine products for that time of the month, because if girls aren't prepared during that time, then they just have to stay home and they miss out on school. And it's not like they have textbooks and things like that. They just listen to teachers. If they're lucky enough to have school supplies to take notes, then they do. But otherwise, you have to rely on your memory. And so I think it's really great that he puts an emphasis on girls getting the same opportunities for education in this book. So I really love this one, 4 out of 5. The second graphic novel that I read this month was This Is Our Pact by Ryan Andrews. And I mentioned this one in my first video. It was a 5 out of 5. It is beautiful as far as illustrations and colors and things like that. It is whimsical. I love whimsy. It is a middle grades graphic novel, but I think everyone should read it because the way that it's written and the illustrations is so cinematic. It's like you're watching a movie. It's about friendship and staying true to who you are and sticking up for people. And I love one of the main characters. His name is Nathaniel. He is, I don't want to say spirit animal, but I feel for the dude. We're in the same boat. Nathaniel's a little bit quirky. He's really passionate about the things that he likes. And I think to a certain extent, he knows that people think that he's a little bit weird, but it doesn't stop him. And that's what I like to see. Again, 5 out of 5. Absolutely beautiful graphic novel. If you like graphic novels, you should read it. If you don't like graphic novels, you should read it and add this to your collection. The next 2 books are both written by Elizabeth Acevedo, and they are The Poet X and Clap When You Land. They're both written in verse, and I did talk about this one in my first video. The Poet X is about a high school girl who is growing up in, I want to say Brooklyn. I was wrong. She's growing up in Harlem. She's got a twin brother and a very strict Catholic mother. And she's Hispanic. That tells you a great deal right there. The relationship between Zoe and her mom is a big focus in this novel. Her mom wants her to go to confirmation classes, but Zoe really wants to go to slam poetry club that meets at the same time after school. And so there's a struggle there. And it's just beautifully written. Elizabeth Acevedo is the queen of less is more whenever it comes to writing, because she writes in verse. So there's already a challenge there to not use too many words, but she says so much with the little that you see. It's not a very big book. I read it in a couple of hours, 5 out of 5. I cried. I was filled with so much hope. And then Clap When You Land was more of like a 4, 3.5 out of 5. It's about two sisters who don't know that they're sisters until they find out that their dad has died in a plane crash. One sister's growing up in the Dominican Republic, and then the other sister's growing up in New York. And so it's really interesting to see how they live so differently. The sister who lives in New York, her father spends time with her all year round, but he goes away in the summer to visit his other daughter. And that's just such a crazy concept to me, that someone could have two separate lives and somehow balance it, and just to see the effects of it. I will say that even though I didn't like this one as much as The Poet X, it did have a lot of beautiful descriptions in it. I tabbed some of them. I will mention that there is a bit of a trigger in this book, which is probably why I didn't like it as much, but it does talk about child sex trafficking. It kind of alludes to it, so if that's a trigger for you, if that's going to bother you, then just be aware of it before you read it. I still think you should read it because, again, Elizabeth Acevedo, fantastic writer. And if you're going to buy one of her books, I may encourage you to splurge just a little bit and get the hardback, because her hardback covers are just beautiful. I have another novel by her, With the Fire on High, and it is also a really gorgeous hardback cover. And the last book I wanted to talk about was my very first Agatha Christie novel, and that was And Then There Were None. The reason I picked this up is because in March, I read the Truly Devious series, and the main character's favorite book was And Then There Were None. I think. If it wasn't her favorite, she mentioned it a good bit. If you don't know who Agatha Christie is, she is the queen of mystery. She's written like 30 books or something crazy like that, maybe more. I haven't counted. But anyways, this is a mystery novel where 10 people get invited to kind of like a bed and breakfast on an island. They're not related to each other in any kind of way. And then people are slowly being murdered one by one. It was really difficult for me to rate this book. I didn't even rate it because halfway through the book, I was like, why does this sound so familiar? I feel like I've read this book before, but I know I haven't because I've never read Agatha Christie. And that's when I realized poor, naive Nicole, as a teen, read Gretchen McNeil's 10, which is essentially this book, but with teenagers. You can imagine my disappointment when I found that out. So I couldn't really give this a fair rating simply because I already knew what was going to happen. And after I realized the connection, I was just so bummed out. I just wasn't invested in the story anymore. What I will say about this book is, if you're going to read it, have a pen and pad close by, because you're introduced to 10 people the first couple of pages, and I couldn't keep them apart to save my life. It was maybe a third of the way through before I was like, oh, that's who that guy is. So I will just say that. Agatha Christie's also super fond of the word queer. Everything is queer. Like, oh, what a queer situation we find ourselves in. Yes, quite queer. She used it a lot in her book. If I read it again, I'll probably count how many times she uses the word queer. I don't know why I found that annoying, but I just thought, you could have used a thesaurus. There are lots of other words that I think could have applied just as well. But she's the queen, so she gets to do whatever she wants. Also, if you're going to read either of these books, I would suggest reading this one first, and then reading this one. Because I remember liking this one a lot. And that may just be because I was like a teenager and didn't know any better. I think I'm going to reread this though and see how it holds up. I feel like this one was a bit more, I don't want to say chilling, but I can't think of another word right now. I could use a thesaurus. But it was a little bit creepier simply because it's teenagers and they're being murdered. So there's that. But anyway, those are all the books that I read in June. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you pick up some of the books that I read. We're almost halfway through June. We're almost halfway through July. And so far, I read some pretty decent books. So next month's wrap up, this month's wrap up for next month should be really good. And I know I said I wasn't gonna buy any more books, but your girl got a little extra cash and she did. So there should be a book haul coming in the very near future. But anyways, happy Friday. I hope you have a beautiful weekend, and yeah, bye. The book portion of this video is officially over, but I always feel like the internet could use some more wholesome cat content. So here it is. Look at that sweet baby just napping, having little cat dreams. Okay, now this is officially over. Bye.